Hello, friends. Good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in this world. Hello, let it go, let it be. Jayanta, welcome. We are doing a sutta reading today. My name is Bhante Jayasara, visiting here at Empty Cloud Monastery. We'll be covering a sutta today and tomorrow. Not me tomorrow, but the next 2 days we'll have suttas in the mornings. So we are going to be covering Majjhima Nikaya number 51, which is a sutta where the Buddha speaks to lay people who practice satipatthana. And it's a fairly long one, so I'm not going to do too much of an introduction before we just jump right into it. I'm going to see if I can't share the screen here. I guess it won't allow me to share. I think I tried that before, didn't I? I tried sharing in a previous stream. Anyway. Let me just get set up here and then we'll get started. All right, here we go. So I'm going to be using Bhante Sujato's translation on Sutta Central. I'll put a copy of it for those who want to follow along. I'm sure not everybody has the $60 hard copy of the Majjhima Nikaya. If not, well, start saving for it. There's my Bhante Sudasoism since he's not here. That's definitely something Bhante Sudasa would say. All right. So, with Kandaraka. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Champa on the banks of the Gaggara lotus pond together with a large sangha of mendicants. Then Pesa, the elephant driver's son, and Kandaraka, the wanderer. So anytime you see in the suttas this term wanderer, what this is referring to almost always is related to other samanas. So these are other people that have checked out of society and are, wandering the woods and following various different practices that they think will lead them to awakening. Another example of other wanderers at the time of the Buddha, in the context of the suttas, would be the Jains. Right, so this is another person who, he's not a Brahmin, he is a samana. He's wandering, trying to figure out awakening, but he's not a Buddhist. When they approached, Pesa bowed and sat down to one side, which is respectful. It's pretty typical respectful. But the wanderer, Kandaraka, exchanged greetings with the Buddha and stood to one side. Still not quite disrespectful, but not as respectful. He looked around the mendicant sangha who were very silent and said to the Buddha, "It's incredible, Master Gautama. It's amazing how the mendicant Sangha has been led to practice properly by Master Gautama. All the perfected ones, the fully awakened Buddhas in the past or the future who lead the mendicant Sangha to practice properly will at best do so like Master Gautama does in the present." That's so true, Kandaraka. That's so true. All the perfected ones, the fully awakened Buddhas in the past or the future, who lead the mendicant Sangha to practice properly will at best do so like I do in the present. For in this mendicant Sangha, there are perfected mendicants who have ended the defilements, completed the spiritual journey, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, achieved their own goal, utterly ended the fetters of rebirth, are rightly freed through enlightenment. And in this mendicant Sangha, there are trainee mendicants who are consistently ethical, living consistently, alert, living alertly. They meditate with their minds firmly established on the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. Satipatthana. What for? It's when a mendicant meditates by observing an aspect of body, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of covetousness and bitterness for the world. They meditate observing an aspect of feelings, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of covetousness and bitterness for the world. They meditate observing an aspect of mind, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of covetousness and bitterness for the world. They meditate observing an aspect of principles, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of covetousness and bitterness for the world. So these are the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? Satipatthana. This is one of the most important teachings, meditative practices that the Buddha gives us to practice, right? These are 4 foundations, 4 bases for the development of our mindfulness. Right? We place our awareness on these 4 aspects of our experience, and we can learn a lot from it. This very, very important practice for everybody. Everybody who is a Buddhist practitioner should know very well Satipatthana. Right? You can go to where we're in the Majjhima Nikaya number 51, but if you go to Majjhima Nikaya number 10, you can go to the Satipatthana Sutta. All right, so let me just take a break here and say hello. Welcome, Naranjan, Luisa. When he had spoken, Pessa said to the Buddha, "It's incredible, sir. It's amazing. How well described by the Buddha are the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. They are in order to purify sentient beings, to get past sorrow and crying." And you go to Majjhima Nikaya number 10, Satipatthana Sutta, you will see this at the very beginning of the sutta. This is the kind of explanation. Although it's missing the first line, which would be, "This is the direct path," or the one way. A lot of people don't like hearing the one way these days. So people don't translate it as that. But it is the direct path for the purification of beings, to get past sorrow and crying, to make an end of pain and sadness, to discover the system and to realize extinguishment. Morning, Yankee. Welcome, Sud. Now, we have a very important line right here, because many lay people might think, well, These kind of things are for monastics. There was not such a distinction like this. You can read the suttas, you can see that this is not the case. The Buddha did not make a distinction that there were certain practices only for monastics or certain practices only for lay people. He understood that depending on where you were in the path, you might not actually do this. You might not fully get involved in doing something like Satipatthana. But there was no there was no kind of limitation. Right? This is a very important thing to see here. So the line, for we white-clothed lay people also from time to time meditate with our minds well established in the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. Hello, UD, Douglas. This is a very important line. For we white-clothed lay people also do this. What does that mean? There's no excuses. If you're busy, you say, oh, my life is so busy. I have lots of work and kids and things and such and such and such. And I will only allow one possible excuse. As I often will say, I have many more years of practicing as a layperson than as a monastic still. So unlike, say for instance, like my preceptor, Bhante Gunaratana, who had been a monk since he was 11, right? You might be able to pull one over on Bhante and say, oh, we're so busy working. But I was one of those lay people busy working, and I practice. So you can't pull one over on me. Now, I will say if you're very busy and you also have lots of kids, maybe I'll give you a little bit of an excuse, but not too much. You could still find ways and times to practice, including introducing your children to it. But let's get back to the sutta here. This wonderful lay person here practicing Satipatthana. We meditate observing an aspect of the body, feelings, mind, principles, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of covetousness and bitterness for the world. So I do feel like I want to make one clarification, especially those who are more used to Bhikkhu Bodhi's older translation of Dhamma Nupassana here. It's mind objects, I think he translates that as, right? Yes, yeah. So mind objects is now an obsolete translation. Even Bhikkhu Bodhi does not use this translation anymore. And it was weird because I remember in my earlier days, like mind objects, you read the Satipatthana Sutta and you say mind objects. That definition doesn't describe what's actually in that section. But now you have, Bhante Analio and here Bhante Sujato, even my preceptor Bhante Gunaratana. There's been a kind of general change as far as I've been able to see to translating this 4th one as principles. And I think that makes the most sense because when you look at, the first 3 are kind of more obvious. They're more direct, right? Body, right? We inhabit this body, easy to kind of understand. Feeling, right? We have pleasant and painful feelings and neutral feelings. Mind, the state of the mind, something a bit easier for people, not easy per se, but easier for people to understand. But the 4th one seems a little bit different. And I think principles is perfect because principles, this is the 4th one, and I don't believe they go into detail here, but I do want to explain it, especially if you're not used to the newer translation. So, and I don't know what Bhante Sudaso translates it as. I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen one of his translations of Satipatthana. But this principle, so what's in the 4th one? 5 aggregates, 5 hindrances, right? 4 noble truths, 6 senses, 7 factors of awakening, right? These are all different ways that the Buddha has given us for understanding our experience or investigating our experience. So this is why I think principles makes the most sense here. Mind objects seems a bit too general for me, and this has been a pretty general change to principles. So we also, lay people, will do the 4 foundations of mindfulness. It's incredible, sir. It's amazing how the Buddha knows what's best for sentient beings. Even though people continue to be so shady, rotten, and tricksy. Tricky. You see this kind of sentiment today, don't you? Like, people are a virus on the planet and people are horrible, blah, 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 blah. Right? This is a pretty common thing you hear today. The Buddha is so wonderful. He knows what's best for sentient beings, even though people are so low down, rotten, shady, and tricky. For human beings are shady, sir, while the animal is obvious. For I can drive an elephant in training, and while going back and forth in Champa, it'll try all the tricks, bluffs, ruses, and feints that it can. But my bondservants, employees, and workers behave one way by body, speech, and mind, and their minds another. So this is this person kind of talking about how the animal is obvious. What this means is that you understand much more simply what the animal is trying to do, right? There's not this kind of shadiness, this duplicitousness, this act one way and be another. So that's what this is meaning here by the animal is obvious. It's incredible, sir. It's amazing how the Buddha knows what's best for sentient beings, even though people continue to be so shady, rotten, and tricky. For human beings are shady while the animal is obvious. Now the Buddha's response, that's so true, Pessa. That's so true. For human beings are shady while the animal is obvious. Pessa, there are these four people found in the world. What for? One person mortifies themselves. So mortification here, this is a word that you don't really see much, but this is someone who's causing themselves to suffer needlessly. Like the Buddha did his 6 years of mortification. Like eating 1 grain of rice a day and, sleeping on a bed of nails and all these kind of things to kind of cause yourself suffering. So that's what this is. It's somebody who is causing suffering. So one person mortifies themselves, committed to the practice of mortifying themselves. One person mortifies others, committed to the practice of mortifying others. One person mortifies themselves and others, committed to the practice of mortifying themselves and others. One person doesn't mortify themselves, or either themselves or others, committed to the practice of not mortifying themselves or others. But what is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation for that word? Mortification. Torture. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very used to now well over a decade of Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, so I'm pretty good in remembering what he uses to translate things. But this is one that torture. All right. Torment or torture. All right.
Yeah. They torment or torture.
This is the great thing about working with multiple translations. So you get to see different perspectives of things. All right. So we have somebody who tortures themselves, somebody who tortures others, somebody who tortures both. And fourth is one person who doesn't mortify them, either themselves or others, committed to the practice of not mortifying themselves or others. They live without wishes in the present life, extinguished, cooled, experiencing bliss, with self become divine. That's a confusing translation. But the question is then, which one of these four people do you like the sound of? Sir, I don't like the sound of those first three people. That makes sense, doesn't it? Do you like the sound of somebody torturing themselves or torturing others or torturing both? No, I don't think most people do. I don't like the sound of those first three people. I only like the sound of that last person who doesn't mortify either themselves or others. Let me stop real quick and just, because I see we've been joined with some more people here. Welcome, Yudi, Douglas, Edward, Bhumika. So the Buddha says, but why don't you like the sound of those three people? Sir, the person who mortifies themselves does so even though they want to be happy and recoil from pain. That's why I don't like the sound of that person. The person who mortifies others does so even though others want to be happy and recoil from pain. That's why I don't like the sound of that person. The person who mortifies themselves and others does so even though both themselves and others want to be happy and recoil from pain. That's why I don't like the sound of others. So this is pretty basic logic, isn't it? This is pretty basic experiential understanding of things. You know that you don't like unpleasant things, that you don't like pain and suffering. When you don't want to have to deal with these things. And so you know other people around you, your family members, people you can see. It's obvious that other people don't like, having people cause them suffering and things like this, like causing harm to other people. So this is something that even, some animals can understand. They don't want to experience harm, and they understand some animals in some level understand that others don't want to, animals don't want to be harmed. So this is something very basic. It's fairly obvious. It's not something that's too deep or complicated here. So it makes perfect sense that this person would be like, "Oh yeah, I don't like the sound of these other three." They do this even though they know beings don't like harm, right? They fear the rod, as said in many different suttas. They fear pain. They fear the rod. That's why I don't like the sound of that person. The person who doesn't mortify either themselves or others, living without wishes, extinguished, cooled, experiencing bliss, with self becoming divine, does not torment themselves or others, both of whom want to be happy and recoil from pain. So having himself become holy, let it go. This is talking about somebody who's awakened. Just like, so this whole line that we just went through, right? Living without wishes. Only an awakened being does that. Extinguished. That's an awakened being. Cooled. Experiencing bliss, with the self become divine. Now it's kind of a wacky translation, because you think, well, what do you mean? I thought the Buddha says there's no self, but it is atta. It's talking about just within the person, right? This is using kind of mundane language. This is not transcendent. This is not transcending language here. When they're talking about the self, because atta can mean like in anatta, like this belief in this like permanent essence, permanent soul, or it can just mean like this self, this person, this being. So it's important to understand the different contexts there. The translation is not saying that that the permanent soul has become divine here. does not torment themselves or others, both of whom want to be happy and recoil from pain. That's why I like the sound of that person. Well, now, sir, I must go. I have many duties and much to do. That is one of the downfalls of the layperson. You see this in the suttas often. Well, I have to get going. I have many duties and much to do. If only he had stayed a little bit longer. Please, Pesa, go at your convenience. And then Pesa, the elephant driver's son, approved, agreed, and with that, what the Buddha said, he got up from his seat, bowed, and respectfully circled the Buddha, keeping him on his right before leaving. Then, not long after he had left the Buddha, just the mendicants. Mendicants? Pesa, the elephant driver's son, is astute. He has great wisdom. If he had sat here a little longer so that I could have analyzed these 4 people in detail, he would have greatly benefited. Still, even with this much, he has already greatly benefited. Now is the time, Blessed One. Now is the time, Holy One. May the Buddha analyze these 4 people in detail. The mendicants will listen and remember it. Well then, mendicants, listen and pay close attention. I will speak. The Buddha said this. And what person mortifies themselves, committed to the practice of mortifying themselves? It's when someone goes naked, ignoring conventions. So this is talking about a naked ascetic. This is not somebody who's just like, goes without clothes. So these are going to be all types of ways of being overly ascetic. Right? And the Buddha tried most of these. Ignoring conventions, they lick their hands and don't come or wait when called. They don't consent to food brought to them or food prepared for them or an invitation for a meal. They don't receive anything from a pot or a bowl or from someone who keeps sheep or who has a weapon or a shovel in their home or where a couple is eating or where there is a woman who is pregnant, breastfeeding, or who has a man in her home. Or where there's a dog waiting or flies buzzing. They accept no fish or meat or liquor or wine and drink no beer. So this is some interesting kind of ways that people are have not doing something because of certain reasons. Oh, there's a pregnant woman in this house. I can't go there. I can't, get food from this place. Because it won't be pure or something like that. So these are different kind of ways that people are viewing how to do something. There's no really actual good reason to do this. This is why this is a person who's tormenting themselves, who's making it worse for themselves.
Yeah, there's no one they could receive food from.
Yeah. Tata has a question. Doesn't the shovel refer to the Jains? I'm not sure. I don't know if I know that.
Shovel or weapon, you're either working in the fields or you're protecting those gains.
They go to just one house for alms, taking just one mouthful, or 2 houses and 2 mouthfuls, up to 7 houses and 7 mouthfuls. They feed on 1 saucer a day, 2 saucers a day, up to 7 saucers a day. They eat once a day, once every second day, up to once a week, and so on, even up to once a fortnight. And so you see here, actually, interestingly enough, you see the Buddha is talking about these being ascetic practices, one of which is they accept no fish or meat. Right? We see this in another area, another part of the suttas in the monastic Vinaya, where vegetarianism was asked to be made mandatory, in addition to other things like only eating once a day, having only 1 set of robes, etc. But the Buddha said that this would be things that each monk could choose on their own because it's an extra ascetic practice. right? So we see this. These are not necessarily bad things, but they are extra torments that might not necessarily be needed. Except for the not drinking beer thing. That's just, that's obviously. So you might think, well, the Buddha doesn't, says this goes too far, but then the Buddha says it has this rule. This seems like it goes too far. And that's where a lot of the context of the time has to come into play. It's not easy to be able to distinguish between those two things. Even for me, I mean, I'm not an expert, obviously. I've been doing this, for like 15 years or so. But even after 15 years, there's still much that I don't understand, which is why you go to people like Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhante G and Bhante Analio and etc. And they might understand something. They eat once a day, once every second day, or up to once a week, even up to once every 2 weeks. They live committed to the practice of eating food at set intervals. They eat herbs, millet, wild rice, poor rice, water lettuce, rice bran, scum from boiling rice, sesame flour, grass, or cow dung. They survive on forest roots and fruits or eating fallen fruit. One of the other reasons why I love suttas like this is because you get to kind of get a glimpse into the culture and some of the things that are done at the time. You'll even see, I think, coming up, they'll talk about kind of like, what is like right livelihood for people who are ascetics and things like that. It's really interesting, at least from, I was an anthropology major, so this stuff is always interesting to me. This is one of the reasons I love the suttas, because it's peering into the an ancient culture. They wear robes of sun hemp, mixed hemp, corpse wrapping cloth, rags, low tree bark, antelope hide, kusa grass, bark, wood chips, human hair, horse hair, or owl's wings. Some of those things, most of those are not allowable, but some of those things are for monastics, like the corpse wrapping cloth, right? So even though this is something that is encouraged and something that is done, it's still kind of an extra ascetic thing. If it wasn't, the 3 monastics in this room right now would be smelling the place up pretty bad. All right. At least that's what I'm told. I've been told that the monks that get like the corpse wrapping cloth, the smell never really actually goes away. I don't know. So they tear out their hair and beard, committed to this practice. This is not shaving. This is literally like tearing out. They constantly stand, refusing seats. You ever see in India, if you've, I mean, I've never been there, but I've only seen videos, and you'll see like there's people that will just go like this, and they'll keep their hand up until it atrophies, right? They'll do all kinds of these different practices. And this is someone who's constantly standing without refusing seats. They squat, committed to the endeavor of squatting, right? They lie on mats of thorns, making a mat of thorn their bed of nails, right? They're committed to the practice of immersion in water 3 times a day, including the evening. So these are the ascetics who believe that they, if you bathe 3 times a day, if you bathed a lot, then you would, by bathing your body, you would cleanse your mind. Buddha basically denied this, and there's 1 or 2 suttas at least where he basically kind of says like they're basically wasting their time. But okay, and so they live committed to practicing these various ways of mortifying and tormenting the body. This is called a person who mortifies themselves, being committed to the practice of mortifying themselves. And what person mortifies others? It's when a person is a slaughterer of sheep, pig, or poultry, a hunter or a trapper, a fisher, a bandit, an executioner, a butcher, a jailer, or someone with some other kind of cruel livelihood. This is called a person who mortifies others, being committed to the practice of mortifying others. And what person mortifies themselves and others, being committed to the practice of mortifying themselves and others? Tate said, okay, this is to the Jain thing, digging around and killing insects. Well, technically, Buddhist monastics aren't allowed to dig around for the same reason, actually. Hello, Maria and Rich. Okay, so this is, how does a person mortify themselves and others? It's when a person is an anointed aristocratic king or a well-to-do Brahmin. He has a new temple built to the east of the city. He shaves off his hair and beard, dresses in a rough antelope hide, and smears his body with ghee and oil. Scratching his back with antlers, he enters the temple with his chief queen and Brahmin high priest. There he lies on bare ground strewn with grass. The king feeds on the milk from one teat of a cow that has a calf of the same color. The chief queen feeds on the milk from the second teat. The Brahmin high priest feeds on the milk from the third teat. The milk from the fourth teat is served to the sacred flame. The calf feeds on the remainder. He says, slaughter this many bulls, bullocks, heifers, goats, rams, and horses for sacrifice. Fell this many trees and reap this much grass for the sacrificial equipment. So this is a person who is doing all kinds of mortifications and has the ability to command others to also do this, right? Go and kill these beings. Do this. His slaves, employees, and workers do their jobs under threat of punishment and danger, weeping with tearful faces. This is called the person who mortifies themselves and others, being committed to the practice of mortifying themselves and others. And what person doesn't mortify either themselves or others, but lives without wishes, extinguished, cooled, experiencing bliss, with self become divine? It's when a realized one arises in the world, perfected, a fully awakened Buddha. So now this is the qualities of the Buddha here. Accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. He has realized with his own insight this world, with its gods, Maras, and Brahmas, this population, with its ascetics and Brahmins, gods and humans. He makes it known to others. He teaches Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, meaningful and well phrased. And he reveals a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure. A householder hears that teaching, or a householder's child, or someone reborn in some clan. They gain faith in the realized one and reflect. Living in a house is cramped and dirty, but the life gone forth is wide open. It's not easy for someone living at home to lead the spiritual life, utterly full and pure, like a polished shell. Why don't I shave off my hair and beard, dress in ochre robes, and go forth from the lay life to homelessness? After some time, they give up a large or a small fortune and a large or a small family circle. They shave off their hair and beard, dress in ochre robes, and go forth from the lay life to homelessness. Once they've gone forth, they take up the training and livelihood of mendicants. They give up killing living creatures, renouncing the rod and the sword. They're scrupulous and kind, living full of compassion for all living beings. They give up stealing. They take only what is given and expect only what's given. They keep themselves clean by not thieving. They give up unchastity. They are celibate, set apart, avoiding the vulgar act of sex. They give up lying. They speak the truth and stick to the truth. They're honest and trustworthy. and don't trick the world with their words. They give up divisive speech. They don't repeat in one place what they heard in another, so as to divide people against each other. Instead, they reconcile those who are divided, supporting unity, delighting in harmony, loving harmony, speaking words that promote harmony. They give up harsh speech. They speak in a way that's mellow, pleasing to the ear, lovely, going to the heart, polite, likable, and agreeable to the people. They give up nonsense. Their words are timely and true and meaningful, in line with the teaching and the training. They say things at the right time, which are valuable, reasonable, succinct, and beneficial. They avoid injuring plants and seeds. There's what we're talking about, Tate. They eat in one part of the day, so before solar noon, abstaining from eating at night and food at the wrong time. They avoid dancing, singing, music, and seeing shows. They avoid beautifying and adorning themselves with garlands, perfumes, and makeup. They avoid high and luxurious beds. They avoid receiving gold and money, raw grains, raw meat, women and girls, men and female slaves, goat and sheep, chicken and pigs, elephants, cows, horses and mares, and fields and land. They avoid running errands and messages. Did you know that there's a monastic rule that monastics aren't supposed to be, giving messages from one person to another? Buying and selling, falsifying weights and metals, bribery.
That's for livelihood, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you said, would you mind telling so-and-so something? That wouldn't be good.
No, yeah, it's true enough. Although it is interesting, though, what is meant by livelihood, right? So, I mean, technically, getting food from lay people is your livelihood. So, I don't know. That's an interesting thing. Maybe we could talk about that more. I'd like to have a discussion on that. But, okay. Elephants, cows, horses, and mares, and fields and land. They avoid running errands and messages, buying and selling, falsifying weights, metals, or measures, bribery, fraud, cheating, duplicity, mutilation, murder, abduction, banditry, plunder, and violence. They're content with robes to look after the body and alms food to look after the belly. Wherever they go, they set out taking only these things. They're like a bird. Wherever it flies, wings are its only burden. In the same way, a mendicant is content with robes to look after the body and alms food to look after the belly. Wherever they go, they set out taking only these things. When they have this entire spectrum of noble ethics, they experience a blameless happiness inside themselves. When they see a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in features and details. So we've gone from the sila aspect. Right? This was all related to sila, living by virtuous principles. Now we're moving into sense restraint. When they see a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in features and details. So what does this mean? Right? You see a person that is attractive to you, or food that brings up some craving, and you see it, and he's like, oh, like whatever. Use some food, a croissant or something. It's like, ooh, this croissant. Then what are the features and details? Ooh, the color looks just right. It's toasted just right. It's flaky just right. This, that, etc. That's features and details. Oh, that person. Oh, their eyes are so this. Their muscles are so that. Their hair is so this. That's features and details, right? So you can observe that. Right? If you observe how it works, there's this initial attractiveness. Boom. And you can just end it right there. You can say, oh, this is an attractive person. This is a good looking croissant or whatever. This food looks great. And then you just end it right there. You reflect on what the Buddha said in another sutta, in the seeing, only seeing. And when you are able to do that, then you don't get caught up in the features and details. If the faculty of sight were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of covetousness and bitterness would become overwhelming. For this reason, they practice restraint, protecting the faculty of sight and achieving its restraint. When they hear a sound with the ears, smell an odor with their nose, taste a flavor with their tongue, when they feel a touch with their body, when they know a thought with their mind, they don't get caught up in features and details. If the faculty of mind were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of covetousness and bitterness would become overwhelming. For this reason, they practice restraint, protecting the faculty of mind and achieving its restraint. And this is also, admittedly, perhaps the Buddha does not teach this to lay people as much in the suttas as you might think. But this is also just not a monastic thing, right? Because what restraint is for what? The Buddha just says it. Bad, unskillful qualities of covetousness, etc. Right? So this is to make sure that you are not acting in unskillful ways. That's what it's for. So that you can, and whether you're a layperson or a monastic, if you're following the Noble Eightfold Path, if you're trying to live more skillfully in the world, then not getting caught up in features and details and having mindfulness. This is a reason why this is, in a sutta talking about satipatthana. How do you realize that you get wrapped up in sights and features? Well, you start practicing satipatthana and you see it for yourself. You say, oh man, I just spent 10 minutes having all kinds of thoughts and narratives about this person or this food or this car or whatever. That was such a waste of time, and it actually was quite unskillful. It didn't really help. How about I try not to restrain that? How about I refrain from doing that in the future? When they have this noble sense restraint, they experience an unsullied bliss inside themselves. They act with, now this is one of those translations I'm not a big fan of, situational awareness. And actually, when I was in Australia, I spent a night with Bhante Sujato. I spoke to him about this translation because I come from. I was never in the military, but because I come from military-esque circles and police circles and also child protective service circles, when I see situational awareness, this is being totally aware of what's going on around you. Like, when I would go in people's houses, I would have to make sure I knew where an exit was in case, they tried to kill me or something like that. So for me and for many, situational awareness is in that kind of a situation. And it's not necessarily exactly what it means. If you do define it, it can mean more than that, but situational awareness. So this is sampajanya. I think clear comprehension is one of the older translations, but I think it is the best translation. I think because you're clearly comprehending exactly what you are doing and experiencing. And so here we see this line. This is also from Kaya Nupassana of Satipatthana Sutta. They act with sampajanya when going out and coming back. So when walking back and forth, looking ahead and aside, when bending and extending the limbs, when bearing the outer robe, bowl and robes, when eating, drinking, chewing, tasting, when urinating and defecating. And this is why when I talk about mindfulness to people, I say, next time you go in the bathroom, don't bring your phone in there. Pay close attention to what's happening. You don't want to do that. That's why you bring your phone and, or do something else, right? Or in the old days before phones, it was the newspaper. But the Buddha wants us to be totally aware of what's happening and what we're doing, no matter what. This is why I always say there's not one experience when you are conscious and awake, there's not one experience that cannot be used as an object of meditation, as a practice of satipatthana. Every single thing that you can experience while conscious and awake, you can investigate it and you can understand it through Satipatthana. When walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, waking, speaking, and keeping silent. When they have this noble spectrum of ethics, this noble contentment, this noble sense restraint, and this noble mindfulness and situational awareness, so that's sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, they frequent a secluded lodging. So this is like you've developed yourself and you're like, you know what? I want to go on a retreat. And how many of you have done this, right? You start practicing at home and you start to have the practice starts to work. And you know what? I want to go on a retreat. Let me go to the forest for a week. These kind of things. They frequent a secluded lodging, a wilderness, the root of a tree, a hill, a ravine, a mountain cave, a charnel ground, a forest, open air, a heap of straw. After the meal, they return from alms food, sit down cross-legged, set their bodies straight, and establish mindfulness in front of them. Giving up covetousness for the world, they meditate with a heart rid of covetousness, cleansing the mind of covetousness. Giving up ill will, they meditate with a mind rid of ill will, full of compassion for all living beings, cleansing the mind of ill will and malevolence. Giving up dullness and drowsiness. So we're going through the 5 hindrances here. The 5 hindrances are being subdued. That can only mean one thing. Jhana is coming. Oh, true. Yeah, true. Giving up dullness and drowsiness, they meditate on a mind rid of dullness and drowsiness, perceiving light, mindful and aware, cleansing the mind of dullness and drowsiness. Giving up restlessness and remorse, they meditate without restlessness, their mind peaceful inside, cleansing the mind of restlessness and remorse. Giving up doubt, they meditate having Giving up doubt, they meditate having gone beyond doubt, not undecided about skillful qualities, cleansing the mind of doubt. They give up these 5 hindrances, corruptions of the heart that weaken wisdom. Then, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, they enter and remain in the first jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. As the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are stilled, they enter and remain in the second jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of immersion, with internal clarity and mind at one, without placing the mind and keeping it connected. And with the fading away of rapture, they enter and remain in this third jhana, where they meditate with equanimity, mindful and aware. They personally experience the bliss of which the noble ones declare. Equanimous and mindful, one meditates in bliss, giving up pleasure and pain, and ending former happiness and sadness. They enter and remain in the fourth jhana, without pleasure or pain, with pure equanimity and mindfulness. When their mind has become immersed in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, temporarily rid of corruptions, that's an important thing to understand, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, they extend it towards the recollection of past lives. They recollect many kinds of past lives. That is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000 rebirths. Many eons of the world contracting, many eons of the world expanding, many eons of the world contracting and expanding. They remember, there I was named this. My clan was that. I looked like this and that was my food. This is how I felt pleasure and pain, and that was how my life ended. When I passed away from that place, I was reborn somewhere else. There too, I was named this. My clan was that. I looked like this, and that was my food. This was how I felt pleasure and pain, and that was how my life ended. When I passed away from that place, I was reborn here. And so they recollect their many kinds of past lives with features and details. There's a time where recollecting your features and details is okay. When their mind has become immersed in a samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruption, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, they extend it towards the death and rebirth of sentient beings. With clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman, they see sentient beings passing away and being reborn. Inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, in a good place or a bad place, they understand how sentient beings are reborn according to their deeds. These dear beings sorry, this is just the scrolling with the mouse pad is never that great. Okay. These dear beings did bad, and by way of body, speech, and mind, they spoke ill of the noble ones, had a wrong view, and they chose to act out of that wrong view. When their bodies break up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. These dear beings, however, did good things by way of body, speech, and mind. They never spoke ill of the noble ones, they had right view, and they chose to act out of that right view. Now, when their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. And so, with clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman, they see sentient beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, in a good place or a bad place. They understand how sentient beings are reborn according to their deeds. And when their mind has become immersed in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, they extend it towards the knowledge of ending the defilements. They truly understand. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. They truly understand these are defilements. This is the origin of the defilements. This is the cessation of the defilements. And this is the practice that leads to the cessation of the defilements. Knowing and seeing this, their mind is freed from defilements of sensuality, desire to be reborn, and ignorance. When they're freed, they know they're freed. They understand. This is what's called the victory cry of the Arahants. In the suttas, when somebody becomes awakened, they would go in front of the other monastics and they would say this. This is they're announcing that they've become awakened. Rebirth is ended. The spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is no return to any form of existence. This is called a person who neither mortifies themselves nor others, being committed to the practice of not mortifying themselves or others. They live without wishes in the present life, extinguished, cooled, experiencing bliss, having become holy in themselves. This is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the mendicants were happy with what the Buddha said. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So this is a wonderful sutta here explaining these four kinds of people in detail. Also explaining the importance of practicing mindfulness, satipatthana. Whether you are a layperson or a monastic, this is something that is beneficial for all of us who are following the Buddhist path. As a matter of fact, it's literally the seventh of the Noble Eightfold Path. Sammasati is four foundations of mindfulness. So, friends, with that, we have come to the end. And I chose a bit longer of a sutta this time, so didn't have too much time for Q&A. But if you do have a burning question, you can save it for tomorrow night for monk chat, and we'll answer it then. Okay, friends, Sukhi Hotu, may you be well and at ease, practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.